Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome to you, and also to anybody who may be following us online. I'm Councillor Ian Edwards, and I'm Chairman of the Central and South Planning Committee. I'll just discuss a little bit about the business. Before we do, just mention a fire alarm. If it does sound, it will be for real. There's nothing expected, and we will be evacuating the premises. Okay. The best way out is the way you came in, through those doors and back out to the main entrance of the Civic Centre. If that's blocked for any reason, there are exits behind. We will all be leaving with you, so there's no worries. We will escort you out. Mobile phones. If I could ask everybody, please, to make sure there's a turn to silent, and mine wasn't. That's that one, and this one. Excuse me, 1 second. Bring that one in, that makes a noise. That's helpful, thank you. Okay, residents' feedback forms. On the paperwork on the chairs, there are feedback forms, and we do welcome your comments. If you have any suggestions on how we may improve the committee meetings, please let us know. They go to Democratic Services, and we do act on those, so I'd be grateful for those. A little bit about the way the meeting is run. It's run in two parts, part one and part two. Part one are the planning applications, the reasons you're here, and there will be a presentation, and we will consider each and every one of those, and that's done in public. Part two are matters of enforcement, and they are considered in private, because ultimately they could end up in prosecutions. However, each of those items is subject to an agenda. You will see the topic of it, and the decision of the committee is also published. There are items on part two, so there will be a break when we invite members of the public to leave. Okay, but the main part one, is that bit that you're interested in. Now, as I say, it's held in public, but it's not a public meeting, so there are no general speaking rights. The only speaking rights are those related with petitions. So the only people that can address the committee are those that have submitted a petition, either for or against, and if one has been submitted a petition and objection, then the applicant is also able to speak. Okay. The committee, the decision makers are the members, council members, councillors, and I will start on my far right hand side. Councillor Stead, Councillor Chandel, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Graham, Councillor Davis. And on my left-hand side, I know you're not. John Oswald. Sorry, John. Know the first name, but it's rude to say that. It's John. Councillor Oswald, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Carter. Please forgive the mental block there. We're assisted around our team by officers. Jyoti Mehta is our legal advisor. Luke Taylor, Democratic Services and clerk at the meeting. Alex Krushak is our planning services manager and gives expert advice on planning matters. Neil McLennan is also a planning officer and will be presenting the case. And Syed Shah is our principal highways engineer and assists us with highways matters. Okay, so that's the way the business is, and these are the committee members. We will get into the main part of the meeting. The first bits are very, very quick. Okay. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
We've had apologies from Councillor Yarrow, Councillor Ahmed Boulana, Councillor Dillon, and substituting Councillor Graham, Councillor Davis and Councillor Oswald. Thank
you very much. You're all very welcome. Declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting this evening. Are there any? Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. I have an interest in item 6, 40 Fraser Avenue, as I live in this road and the applicants are my neighbours, so I will be leaving the meeting.
Thank you for that. Any others, colleagues? No, thank you. Right, to sign and receive the minutes of the previous meeting. And hold on. We have, in fact, 2 meetings. We have minutes going back to the 9th of August. If anybody can remember that far back, are they correct? People who were present at that time. Are these agreed? Thank you very much. And the 13th of October. Thank you. Item 4, matters to be notified in advance or urgent. There are none, so we're just on to the published agenda. And as I mentioned, there are Part 1 and Part 2. So we'll now move into the Part 1 items. We'll move with application agenda item 6, number 40 Fraser Avenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. The site is currently occupied by a large two-storey detached dwelling house. In March 2014, committee granted planning permission for the demolition of the existing house and the erection of a replacement two-storey, six-bed detached house. This permission has not been implemented. The site lies within the Garden City West Drayton area of special local character, as identified in the Hillingdon local plan, and it also lies within flood zones 2 and 3. This current application seeks to vary the existing permission to alter the roof design to create a habitable roof space, and it's brought before committee as a result of petitions both for and against the proposal. The proposed variation of the approved plans would increase the number of proposed bedrooms within the dwelling from 6 to 9. The proposed development significantly exceeds minimum space and amenity standards, and sufficient on-site car parking spaces are available. Subject to the property being used by a single household, this change does not raise any adverse issues in its own right. However, the site is wider than its neighbours and generally open, and any change has the potential to have a significant influence on the character and appearance of the area. In this regard, it is considered that the proposed alteration to roof design by provision of crown roofs would harm the character and appearance of the new dwelling within the street scene. Crown roofs are not a typical feature of the two-storey development in the vicinity of the site or locally on this side of Fraser Avenue, which is characterised mainly by detached houses with hipped roofs. The resulting development would therefore introduce a significant discordant feature in the street scene. The proposed development is therefore not considered to be in keeping with and will be harmful to the character and appearance of the area of special local character. That's the site plan there, and that's the constraints plan showing it in the area of special local character. Another site plan, that's plans of the existing house that occupies the site. That is plans of the previously approved application, and you can see it's designed to appear as two separate dwellings, but it is a single dwelling. And that is the current proposal. So if I just flick back, you can see that is a fully hipped roof without a crown, whereas this includes a crown on both those roofs. If I flick through, there's a colour image showing the existing dwelling and with the properties either side and the amended proposal. That's a CGI of the amended proposal. That's a bird's eye view of the site. I've marked it in red, and you can see the river Colne running at the bottom of the Fraser Avenue here, and then that's the River Fray, or Fraser River, running along there. That's a photo of the existing building. There's another bird's eye view, and there's some street views we've taken to give a bit more context of what the surrounding street is like. So that's the application property here, the properties either side. Further along, that's the other side. That's a view down towards the River Colne end of Fraser Avenue and up towards the Fraser River, and that's a view of the Fraser Road opposite the application site. So as I said, the amendment is considered out of character and is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you.
Okay, we have petitions, lead petitioner and objection, Mrs. Janet Wojinger, if I pronounce that right. Anybody petitioning against this development? No? And we have the agent or applicant has also submitted a petition, and in these circumstances just the one slot of 5 minutes speaking time. So this is Mr. Carwell. If you'd like to come forward, please. If you make yourself comfortable, I'll talk through. Could I see it first, please?
References the petition and reasons for based on those images you've seen. So you can see the local neighbours to our sides, front and back.
Comfortable with it? Okay, Mr. Carwell, if you'd like to take your seat. In giving your petition, you have 5 minutes speaking time. You will see lights. 4 minutes will be green light, 1 minute with amber, and when it comes to the red light, I must stop you, okay? So I'll draw you to a close then. In your own time, microphone in front of you, there's a switch, a button in front of you, toggle on and toggle off, the light will come on. What I omitted to say is that this is on CCTV, it is being broadcast on YouTube. Members of the public, the cameras are this way, so you're not being seen. However, you are. The camera is up behind you but facing this way, okay? But your words of wisdom are not heard unless you press the microphone button. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee for your time today. By way of introduction, we are the Carwell family, the applicants and landowners for the site. The application is a variation to the originally approved scheme by the committee under reference 3650 APP 2013-2962. We are where a decision was issued on the 26th March 2014. We've lived in West Drayton for almost 4 years, and I'm recently married and wish to make this property a home for 3 generations of our joint family. Following much consideration between our family, it was considered necessary to make more practical use of the habitable space roof level. Moving on to the planning merits of our application, the proposal related wholly to a nominal change to the roof profile compared to that which had been previously approved. The footprint and massing of the dwelling remains as approved in 2014. The case officer in this report considered the roof proposal would add bulk to the appearance of the dwelling, which would result in the dwellings appearing different to the general design of the area. We consider the case officer's report to be largely lacking in supporting evidence and largely woolly. As you will have seen from your site visits, Fraser Avenue is characterised as a dwelling set on good-sized plots and large frontages. There is no one prevailing form of roof type within this given area, given the scale and appearance of these properties. Immediately adjacent are examples of front-to-back gable roofs, cat slide roofs, as well as a detached bungalow with a flat top crown roof with a profile larger than that which is proposed under this application. It is our strong opinion that the nominal nature of the flat tops would not detract from the character of the dwellings. The roof proposal would suitably exist within the general character of the area, not appearing largely obtrusive, largely due to the fact that there is no further increase in the ridge height when compared to the 2014 proposal. It is our view that when submitting this application, the proposed roof alterations would appear sympathetic with the character of the area, not resulting in a form of development that would degrade the aims of the West Drayton Garden City area. We consider it appropriate to touch base on the matter of housekeeping and raise our concerns over the handling of this application by your officers. The application was submitted on the 12th of April 2016 and validated on the 18th of April. Here we stand 7 months later waiting for the outcome of an application that requires a statutory 8 weeks to be determined. Poor communication internally between the council officers and our agent have led to 3 complaints to Mr. James Roger, all with flimsy non-committal responses back. We consider that the council have failed us during this determination of the application. My family have suffered serious stress, worry and financially because of the long-term uncertainty by this unnecessarily prolonged process. This is something no family should go through. We've been trying to build our family home for almost 6 years without laying a brick. So I'm sure you can imagine how much this actually means to us. We strongly feel that this matter hasn't been taken seriously given 7 months have passed with no formal decision. We feel that the council have mishandled the application badly and that the matter should have led to a non-determination appeal. However, we wanted to work with the council to achieve planning, and after being told that the application would be recommended for approval, which was later overturned. As such, it is kindly requested that the Planning Committee overturn their officer's recommendation for what is an appropriate form of development within the area. that would only serve to increase the character of West Drayton's garden city area. It is also requested that if the committee is minded to approve the proposal, the previously approved conditions are carried over to this consent to allow us to move forward with this development as soon as possible. Thank you from the Cole family.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, are there any questions at all of the petitioner before he returns to his seat? No, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. You return. Okay, colleagues, matter before us. I'd just like to say, in general, that coming through the petition, I picked up, obviously, points being made about whether or not the roof design was discordant with the local area. And that will be the substance of the discussion. You also mentioned issues about delay of the application. Though that itself, that issue, is outside of this planning committee, it will have no bearing on what is being said here. But if you wish to formalise that complaint, there are processes for doing so, and we will assist you outside afterwards, okay? But at this moment in time, we will only be considering the planning issue and the merits of the application with regards to its impact on the neighbourhood, okay? Right, colleagues, it's you. Councillor Davis.
I'm quite interested to know the thought process of the council officers as to why they find that this particular application is out of line with that particular road, and or whether it's exceeded in some way what would be desirable in that particular area. Having looked at the plans quite carefully, I actually think the new one is actually an improvement on the old one, and I don't think it's particularly out of line with the road. And I'm more interested in hearing, because I noted the recommendation to the committee is to reject this, and I'm a bit puzzled. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cruikshank, or Mr. McClellan.
Thank you. Okay, so when we're assessing any planning application, we use our supplementary guidance, what's related to called our HDAS, our household of design guidance. As a council, we tend to have a concern about the introduction of crown roofs because they add bulk and overall size to development. If you can just switch on to the street view for me. What we've tried to demonstrate in the street view images that we've got before you is we agree with the applicant that there is a wide variation of different roof forms in the area, but there aren't other obvious examples of crown roofs. What you have is varied roof forms, all of which are hipped or gabled, but they minimise the overall impact and size of the roof. The concern we have here is that moving away from a design which copies the spirit of what happens elsewhere in the street to a design which has crown roofs increases the bulk and overall mass of these buildings at that upper level and has a different impact on how it's seen in the street scene. So that's why the recommendation before you this evening is to refuse, because the concern we have is that increased bulk at that upper level of the properties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Chandal.
Thank you, Chairman. Could we have a look at these street scene photographs once again, but slowly? So, because from what I can gather, they seem to be a mishmash of all different. There's nothing really uniform, and I'm going towards what Councillor Davis was saying. Actually, looking at the plans, they actually look better than what we currently have.
Thank you. For me, I'd just like to pick out the comments in the report under the summary at 1, and that is that this roof will introduce a significant discordant feature. And it's only if you agree with that statement that I believe that refusal stands. If you do not believe that this will be a significant discordant feature, then I believe it would be proper for the committee to overturn the officer's recommendation. I do recognise that this is an area of special local character. However, the roof form doesn't seem to be part of it. Councillor Oswald.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, unfortunate, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't actually look too bad, but unfortunately also the summary and the conclusion on page 22 says it all. And what we don't want to do is start opening doors that we can't close behind us. And I think the report is is probably correct, or I'd say it is correct. And I think that the decision is correct as well, Chairman. So just to start it off, I'll move the officer's recommendations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. You indicated, Councillor Carter.
Sorry, my apologies. Is there, I'd just like to point to the officer, is there any way we can make minor adjustments to have the adjustment proved before we actually sort of, rather than refusing it and then making adjustment if they can be agreed and then maybe work on it? Just a question, just a thought.
Thank you, Mr. Cruikshank.
I think we've tried to capture this in the report. So I think what we've done is we've got to a point in time where the applicant feels that they've got a scheme which, as you've heard this evening, they feel doesn't have a wider impact on the street scene and provides them with the accommodation they need for their family. We as officers think that probably more needs to happen, but they want a determination on the plans as they stand. So the report that's before you this evening, my understanding reading through it is that we've put that question to the applicant and they want a determination on the plans as they stand before you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I'll second John with, as much as I feel for them, and maybe they can sort of go away and work on it. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, we've had... Okay, before we take the formal vote, you have an observation to make, Councillor Graham?
Well, only insofar as I'm not clear as to what the approved plan previously was with regard to the roof. I mean, there's no indication in the papers I've got in front of me as to what was approved previously. So I don't know what we're comparing to with previously.
Anyway, so this is the scheme that's approved. So you can see there's no crown roof, it just reaches an apex ridge, with a ridge running back to front on both wings of the house. As we go to what's being proposed now, they've introduced a slightly steeper roof and this crown element on both roofs, just to create enough space for them to get some usable space inside.
Right, okay.
Okay, we've had the motion and seconded that we go with the officer's recommendation and refuse that. Can I have a show of hands in support of that motion, please? 4. And those against? 3. Thank you very much. That application is refused. Okay, we're now turning to agenda item 7. Chadwick Building, Brunel University.
Thank you, Chair. This application site comprises the Chadwick Building, a temporary 2-storey prefabricated building located within Site 1 of the Brunel University campus. The building is accessed from Westborough Road, running east-west off Cleveland Road. The existing prefabricated building was granted a 10-year planning permission in 1987. In 1997, permission was granted for the building to be retained for a further 5 years. The building remained beyond that 5-year period, and in 2013, permission was granted for a further 3 years to provide decant space in conjunction with the refurbishment of the Wilford Brown building. It was originally hoped that these works would be completed within 3 years, but the accommodation remains in use for that purpose due to delays in the construction. Planning permission is now sought for the retention of the building for a period of 5 years in order to provide further decanting facilities while the university carries on refurbishing various buildings. No changes to the appearance of the building are proposed, so there will be no changes to the impact of the building on the street scene or the green belt. The proposed retention of the building for another 5 years comprises policies in the Hillingdon local plan and safety UDP policies. It's therefore recommended that the application is approved subject to the conditions set out in the report. So if I go back, sorry, that is the temporary building. So that's the southern part of the university campus. Some residential, neighbouring residential development there. That's a floor plan of the building. That's the second floor, and that's some elevations. It's quite a large temporary structure. There's an aerial photo with it marked in red, so you can see where it is in relation to some of the other university buildings. There's a picture of it, another photo of it, and that's looking at it across from the car park. And there's some more images of it. So it's a significant temporary building. It's been there quite a while. It's not the sort of building we want to see retained permanently, but we think that there's a case for it to stay there while they carry on decanting students in there, while they carry on with the refurbishment of the rest of the university. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Move officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Stead, seconded. Show of hands, please. Everybody, thank you. Item 8, 20 Vine Lane.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a large detached building currently in use as a single dwelling house, or approved. It's authorised use as a single dwelling house. Permission was granted at September's committee for the conversion of the dwelling from use class C3 to dwelling house to a sui generis to form a 8-bed house in multiple occupation. A condition attached to that permission restricted the occupancy to no more than 8 people. The house is being used as an HMO, but with more than 8 people. Retrospective planning permission is now being sought for the change of use from a single dwelling house to a sui generis to form an 8-bed, 10-person house in multiple occupation. So the number of bedrooms remain the same, but they're quite large bedrooms, and they basically want to allow 10 people rather than 8 people that the previous permission allowed. There are no external alterations proposed, and the dwelling would remain with a similar layout as existing, with 8 double bedrooms, with 6 of them being en suite, a kitchen, an indoor swimming pool and gym, and off-road parking for members for a minimum of 8 cars. So that's the floor plans of the building. This is the swimming pool gym area. Bedrooms on both the ground floor. Sorry, the plans aren't pretty low scale. There's a living room at first floor. And some bedrooms in the roof. That's the aerial photo. That's a photo of the building as it is now. You can see the frontage is virtually entirely hard landscape. There are 2 TPOs, cypress pines, I believe. That's one of them. I think that's the other one there. Some internal shots of the property. That's the swimming pool gym building. And that's the rear garden, so quite an extensive grassed area. So, the principle of an 8-bed HMO has already been approved, but limited to 8 people. The increase of this to an 8-bed, 10-person HMO is not considered to be significant enough for officers to make a different recommendation, and the application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report, as amended in the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stead.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we go back to the photograph showing the front of the building and all the paving, or whatever it is? Yeah. That car on the right-hand side, as you look at it, is that on the property, or is that next door's property? Yeah.
Anybody else? Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm quite interested with the existing arrangements with 8 residents. There have been social and behavioural issues. Can you shed any more light on that? Because we're increasing it by 25%, and obviously in terms of the neighbourhood, wouldn't like to think that the antisocial behaviour would have any impact on the area. Thank you.
Mr. Clem?
We don't have any reports of complaints from EPU or from our HMO licensing officer, and they both support, or the HMO licensing officer supports this revised application, supported the last application. So we don't have a lot of detail of the nature of those complaints at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, then Councillor Chamdell.
Thank you, Chair. I think it just talks about potential impacts. That's in section 7.08 on page 42, but it doesn't say that those impacts exist. And in fact, under external consultees on page 40, paragraph 6, it says a total of 7 adjoining and nearby neighbouring properties were consulted, and only one responded and was concerned that the 2 large trees, which do have a TPO on them, be retained, which they are going to be. So it doesn't appear to be having an adverse impact on the area, and in the absence of local people objecting to it.
Can I draw your attention to the second paragraph of 7.08? Although there have been complaints in the past relating to several matters since an HMO use commenced at number 20.
But not now. Presumably, I don't know.
Since it commenced, it's only just been approved recently for an 8-bed HMO. That's the question. The question is, what are these complaints?
If I may, Chair,
it's operating as an HMO.
Why did they not emerge when they were consulted on this planning application? Have they been resolved? Was it tenants or people occupying it who've now moved on, or what?
We don't know, and that's the question. It's referred to in the report by officers that there have been complaints. Appropriate warning actions have been taken. Several matters. And the question is, what were the several matters? When were they? What was the nature? Is it been recent? Same management, same owners? Because the application here is to increase it by 25%.
We ask when these complaints were did they predate this consultation on the planning application? Because presumably people would have objected strongly if they were still experiencing problems in the area and said, no, we don't want it to increase further because we already have enough problems.
That may be a reasonable assumption, but I think what we need is that information, and if officers aren't able to give that information tonight, it may be that you've formed a view you can't take this further at this stage, or some of you may form that view. Councillor Chamdell.
You said now everything I was going to say. It's quite clear. It's quite clear. It says there, as you said, there have been complaints in the past, but there's no numbers on against that. Whereas 50 complaints, 100 complaints, 1 complaint. Because for me, I mean, we're increasing it by 25%. Is there likelihood that we're going to increase their complaints by 25%? So if it's 1 complaint, we might have a quarter of a complaint. If it's 100, we're going to have another 25. So I would really, because that's key for me, I would really like to know in detail what these complaints have been and how many and when. Because it does say since it's become a HMO.
Sorry, Councillor Graham.
Yes, Chairman. I was invited by the Vine Lane Residents Association to have a look at this, the inside of this particular property some weeks ago, and whilst there I was able to meet with quite a few of the tenants, or occupants, shall we say, and the impression I got was that they were all professional people of a good class, and I would have felt it unlikely that they would be the sort of people that would cause too much of a disturbance to the local neighbourhood.
Thank you.
Would Councillor Graham like to put on record that he comes to the decision-making body? Sorry, Jason.
No, it's fine. Councillor, I think it might be wise for you to put that interest on the record, and especially outline sort of your visit that you did undertake a couple of weeks ago.
The test, sorry, if I may, Chairman, the test is you visited the site. That does not preclude you taking part in this forum. However, you need to confirm that you've come here with an open mind, willing to make a decision on the basis of the information you hear this evening, and you did not come here with a closed mind, having predetermined the application.
Okay, we'll formally record that then.
Thank you.
Councillor Oswald.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I mean, Councillor Graham hasn't spoken to the applicant, he's spoken to the inhabitants, I would have thought, so I think that's okay. If there were any complaints, sorry, I'll start again. If we were to approve this and then there were any complaints, whether there was 25% more or less, that's in our control anyway, antisocial behaviour. We deal with these sorts of things in HMOs in the past, and no doubt we'll deal with them in the future. So I don't really see too much of a problem with that. I take the point of the increase in 25%, I do. But if this is controlled, it's going to get planning permission, should we approve it. I don't really see too much of a problem, Chairman. So I'm going to move the officer's recommendations.
I do hear where you're coming from, but I'd just like to pick up that hook if it is controlled, and the presence of complaints might suggest it isn't being controlled, because it should be the management that controls it, not the council through enforcement action. And what we want to make sure is that the management of this property is capable of managing an HMO of 10. That's what I would be expecting, that the property is suitable for it.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, I think it is suitable. I mean, I live in the ward. I know Councillor Graham's a ward councillor, and I walk past this property on regular occasions, and it's a nice size. Yeah, it's big enough. But as I said before, if there are complaints, we can deal with them, and if we don't deal with them, well, then we should, as a responsible council. Thank you.
Thank you. You have formally moved. Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Yes, I'm given to understand that the kitchen design is, from the point of view of surfaces, is as things stand, not sufficiently big enough to cope with the number of occupants or tenants. So can it be conditioned that would be the case? Should we approve this?
It could be conditioned. I think the kitchen is large enough. It's not clear from the scale of plan submitted whether the amount of workspace in the kitchen meets HMO requirements, although I would stress we do have support of our HMO licensing officer, but technically we can't be absolutely guaranteed on the plan submitted, so a condition may be appropriate if that's what members are minded to do.
Thank you. If we remind you to approve it, then we can condition that it meets the housing standard. Thank you.
Control. So I just thought it'd be helpful for the committee to clarify the control mechanisms in place, because you've raised issues about the number of complaints in the past. So two things to highlight. One is we've had no planning enforcement complaints recently on this property, so any complaints would be something we feel would have been dealt with by our HMO officer as the council. The other thing to highlight is a very similar commentary was included on the previous applications before you in September. So we believe that this comment about complaints being raised predates the September meeting where you looked at the previous application. Okay. As a council, we have different powers to cover different elements. So this evening you were making a determination of whether the use of this building as a 10-person HMO is acceptable in planning terms. That does not take away the council's power to exercise control over the use of the building through the HMO officer and the licensing program they have to go through. The property is already licensed, and the HMO officer would have the ability to step in and take action if there were concerns about the way in which the property is being managed in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we have the motion being put forward. Is it seconded? You'd like to formally second it by Councillor Chapman. Okay, so the motion is that we go with the officer's recommendation and approve this as a 10-bed HMO. Show of hands, please, in favour of that. Oh, of course, with the condition around the kitchen. That is everybody. Thank you very much. Cheers. We're now going to turn into part two. Just a couple of seconds while we